Story 1. Head teacher of my high school tried to expel me for having an epileptic seizure in front of him. Said I was a danger and distraction to other pupils and was disrupting his school. I ended up being kept out of school for 2 months while my parents fought my case. In that time, almost all of the rest of the teaching staff, who were furious with this decision, kept me supplied with work and even one-to-one tutoring when I needed it. This was in a rural area where the next nearest school was 40 miles away, so we had no other school choice. My brother was finding his balance of medication while in high school and would have a seizure every so often in class. That by itself is embarrassing. Why the hell would somebody make it much more difficult for you? I'm sorry, friend. People suck. Story 2. The class was doing a project on criminal justice and held a mock trial. My friend got assigned to play the role of an assault victim. In real life, she had been a victim of an assault that was very similar to that of the character. She felt it would be too emotionally draining and tried to get out of the part. The teacher wanted an explanation, but my friend kept saying it was very personal. This went back and forth a few times over the next 2 days, and it was just not clicking in the teacher's head. Finally, he lost his patience and yelled out, "You are holding up this whole project for everyone. Why the hell is this so difficult for you?" With the whole class paying attention, she admitted she had been assaulted the same way this character had, and went to go cry. They changed the topic of the project after that, but the class never really looked at the teacher the same way again. Story 3. Not a teacher, but the administration had all of us in middle school wear student IDs on a lanyard, color-coded by what hallway your classes were in every single day. Sparked massive actual protests from the students, because even though my town is pretty low on crime rates, that administration, middle school and above, essentially treated every kid like they were either already a criminal or had the strong potential to be one. There were so many protests on the lanyard BS, they stopped doing it after winter break, because it'd be bad publicity if they kept giving out detentions for insubordination the way they were. They also did things like assign seating at lunch and forced the middle schoolers who wanted to go see the high school football games to be fenced in so as not to cause trouble. Story 4. Not my professor, but a friend of mine. His professor was going through some rough marital issues, and this started to reflect in his teaching, or lack thereof. He'd be late almost every day for the first half of the semester. Then there are days that he doesn't show up to teach and never bother to inform the students. When he's able to inform the students of his absence, it's only a few minutes before class starts. Again, imagine this happening constantly for the first half of the semester, or close to that. Soon, word got back to the higher-ups and he was promptly fired. The only problem? He didn't know he was fired and showed up to class. Imagine walking in 15 minutes late and seeing another professor standing there, telling your students what's going to happen with the remainder of the semester. Well, he stayed there for about 10 minutes before making a quiet exit. The new professor, from what I heard, got most of the animosity because the students didn't want to readjust in order to fit his design for the class. From what I've heard, it was pretty simple stuff. Forget the old syllabus and use his, which mentions doing some new, simple assignments. Don't stress about the stuff you haven't done yet, and anything you have done already for the old professor will be counted towards your grade. Some students were still angered by this, but only one student got physically upset because he had done all of the assignments already. Just goes to show you can't please everyone. The student was told repeatedly that he, new professor, will take all works, including those he did, into consideration. The only difference was that he might count them as something less, like an extra grade assignment or quiz grade. This was what upset the student, as he wanted full credit for his work, regardless of what the other students felt. The entire class was now upset with him as he kept lecturing and complaining about this. They haven't started on this assignment yet, from what I'm told. Story 5. One teacher screamed at my class, who is admittedly annoying, "I don't get paid enough to take this crap," when I was 11. Another was obsessed with keeping our classroom clean. She kept students back after class to clean because she found pin marks on their desks, which I know were there before. On the other hand, I had an amazing history teacher who had a great gift for telling stories, and used to bring out strategy board games so we could play through Napoleonic battles. Story 6. In GCSE English, he taught us the wrong novel for almost the entire term. We'd read this book over and over, answered essays, and remembered and studied every significant narrative meaning. Apparently, none of the faculty heads had checked up on him until about 6 weeks before our exams, when they realized all our work was on a book not even on the syllabus, and all our time was effectively wasted. So, to rectify it, we lost all our PE lessons, had to stay late after school 3 days a week, and spent 3 out of 5 lunch breaks cram learning the actual book with another teacher. Safe to say, our class wasn't happy at all, and most parents complained, as it could affect our ability to pass the exams. Story 7. At university, my professor did not tell us the time of our examination, despite numerous emails from 20-odd students, as well as the head professor of the course. This exam could have been any time from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m., and I lived 90 minutes from campus and relied on crap public transportation to get into uni. It got to 9 p.m. the day before the exam. No one knew when the exam would be, and if we missed it, we would fail the entire module. So I took the train to the city where my uni is, booked a cheap, crappy hotel room for the night, just to make sure I was there on time. We all took the exam at 12 p.m., after getting an email an hour before the exam was being held, so I wouldn't have made it in time if I would have stayed at home. Worst part was that no one cared, not the professor, the course lead, or the head of our school. They all just left 30 students in the lurch, allowing them to potentially fail the exam and therefore the module. Story 8. In my second semester of my first year of law school, everyone in my class, 80 plus people, had to take a research class. This class was taught by 4 different law librarians, but followed the same syllabus. It was also worth 1 credit. These librarians ran the class as if it was 3 credits. We had to read, conduct legal research, and write 2 memos throughout the semester, when we had 5 other classes, all within the 2 to 4 credit range. Plus, 1 specific class was notoriously difficult. Anyways, halfway throughout the semester, my class gets pissed at the workload to credit ratio, and someone starts a petition to reduce the number of assignments and/or change the grading for the class from a letter grade to pass or fail. Almost the entire class signs. There were a few holdouts. The student who started the petition delivers it to the librarians. The librarians remove 1 or 2 assignments, but otherwise disregard the petition. Those who signed it all awkwardly suffered through the rest of the semester. Story 9. Forced us to make a donation to a charity. When I didn't bring anything in, I got a demerit. Had to argue that not everyone has the ability to give something away. She then told me off for backtalking in front of the class. Everyone was like, "What the hell?" Story 10. My work sent me on a 3-day advanced Adobe Illustrator course last April in London. Just before the exam, the tutor said, "Oh, by the way, there may be a few questions on this exam that we haven't talked about, so just do your best." What the actual F? My work is paid £1,000 for this. His response was that he can't be expected to teach everything. There were about 6 students in the class, and we were all pretty pissed. Story 11. She didn't believe in field trips because she said that kids would have too much fun, and learning isn't supposed to be fun. However, the entire grade would take the trip, so she was required to take us. So she would make us all sit in a common area of the zoo, museum, etc., and she would hold classroom lessons. It was so upsetting to hear about all the cool things the other kids got to see while we had class. Story 12. He would act like he was enlightened and say stuff like, "Video games rot your brain. All your free time should be spent on education, as that's all that matters." But then during the lessons, he would go completely off topic and start talking about random crap. Apparently, he's making a board game that could compete with chess, because he is just that brilliant. Story 13. I had a college professor who was teaching a history course to a bunch of education majors in their junior year. She would ask us questions all the time about things she hadn't yet lectured on, and then pull the, "Really? No one knows the answer to this? Well, I guess we'll just wait for someone to answer." We were all education majors. We knew this trick. We waited for her out, every single time. She always broke first. People keep asking what's the trick. This was a poorly executed attempt at using the Socratic method. It's better to have students arrive at an answer themselves than it is to tell them. However, you have to first create an environment of trust and respect so that students are comfortable enough to risk a wrong answer. And you have to be willing to provide a little bit of scaffolding should no one know. This professor did neither of those things. Story 14. Throwaway for obvious reasons. When I was a sophomore in high school, there was a shooting at an elementary school in my town. I'm sure you could figure out which one, and we went into lockdown. My math teacher proceeded to hand out the test we were supposed to take that day, and told us to have it done by the end of the lockdown drill. No matter how many students complained or tried to tell her what was going on at the elementary school, she remained adamant that it was just a drill, even when they started reporting death counts. None of us looked at her the same afterwards. Story 15. This was my second year, 12th grade, in school. My teacher, unable to manage 20 of these rowdy kids, is pretty enraged by the end of the class. She has a thing about counting every piece of equipment after class, and she begins counting the Newton meters. Now, if you don't know what these are, they are literally a metal spring with plastic around it that measures how much an item weighs. This teacher counted 19, when there were definitely 20. So she holds us back from lunch. She brings the faculty head in, and we get a bollocking from her. Cannot steal from the school, unjust, yada yada yada. If we were rowdy before, we are raging now, and she requests the least well-behaved kids open their bags. Of course, these kids are protesting, but the teacher offers detention if they don't comply. So after rummaging through a bunch of pubescent kids' bags and finding nothing, she finally goes back to her desk to find the Newton meter sitting behind her world's best teacher mug. The look on her face. Priceless. Story 16. This math teacher had a reputation for being a hard ass and gave a lot of spontaneous tests. He played up one specific revision test, which was right before midterm or final, I think, as being a really big deal, where the result would reflect whether you have any potential in the subject and the usual dramatic spiel. After we did them, he went on holiday and took the tests with him to correct. He forgot to bring them back, and nobody ever got the result. Another bonus, this same teacher had a double period before a double period of gym, and sometimes, 10 minutes before the bell, he goes, "We haven't covered enough, so instead of gym, you'll have another double math now." Story 17. The teachers who would spend half of the class time getting people to wear their uniforms correctly, in the UK by the way, and then not have enough time to cover all the topics for the day, usually leaving us severely behind or backed up with homework. No one cares that someone has to get their tie the right effing length or their shirt tucked in. What makes it more of a joke is they say not having a uniform will cause distractions. Yet, not once on a non-school uniform day did we have anything like that happen. I was one of the kids who wore the uniform correctly, and was one of the top in the class. The problem was other people did not have their uniform right, and would complain the top button hurt their neck or the tie stopped them from breathing, and all sorts of stupid stuff. So again, to clarify, I couldn't get my education in some classes because the teachers were too busy sorting out other people's uniform issues. Story 18. One of our lecturers at uni once. Basically, he doesn't let any of us talk to him unless we make an appointment with him first. Something that takes basically 2 minutes to answer? Nope. Write an email and he'll get back to you. You stop him in a hallway to ask him a question. Nope, only through email and schedule times. Like, even if it literally takes less time to explain something to us than to say, I will only answer questions during scheduled meetings. So email me, and we can arrange something. He will insist on scheduling you in and then locking himself in his office. That's one way to piss off an entire group of students. Story 19. Math teacher, GCSE year. Teacher gave us a piece of coursework that we had a month to do. We weren't the brightest bunnies at math in that particular class, just under average. But somehow, every single student in that class decided we were going to go above and beyond to try and up our grade. We collectively pulled together and worked our asses off, some of us even going without sleep at times so we could work on it and provide help to the others, myself included. When we handed in our coursework, there was a pretty good feeling in the class. We thought we had done well, and we were pleased with ourselves. When we got our papers back, we all got higher grades than usual, and in many cases did even better than we hoped, myself included. Then the teacher informed us that the coursework was only mock and didn't count for anything. We now had to do the real coursework in the span of 2 weeks. There wasn't a riot. Everyone just went quiet. We were collectively stunned in disbelief. No one said anything at all. We simply couldn't believe it. Over the next 2 weeks, I was pretty much crying every night. I had burned myself out over the mock and was just too tired. I had also been recently diagnosed with CFS, which did not help my concentration or mood at all. I wasn't the only one either. Everyone else was having issues, and all the camaraderie we had built up over the month previous just dissolved. Handed in my coursework after the fortnight was up, and then went and cried in the girls' toilets because I knew it was awful. Especially compared to the mock I had been so proud of. The results from that were nearly all below our usual grades. I just about scrapped my old average. Teacher then rubbed salt in the wound by saying she was disappointed in all of us. No one had the energy to even argue, we just took it. I think one person tried complaining to the head teacher afterwards, but nothing came of it. For extra injury, that teacher had several math classes, but we were the only one she pulled that stunt on. Story 20. First day as a new teacher in our school. She originally came from a private school. Asked the class what a hyperbole was, and we were silent as we hadn't heard of them before. She rudely goes, "Oh, I'm sorry, I thought I was teaching a top-set English class." Everyone in the class unanimously agrees after the teacher leaves to go get photocopies to make that teacher's life a living hell. Some students piped up and said she was just as rude as that when talking to her tutor group. Cue the next few weeks of being angels with our original teacher, and being the worst class ever with the rude one. Plus complaining about the rude teacher to our original one and getting our parents to send in complaints about the rude one. We had her fired by Christmas. Story 22. First teacher was new to the school and taught us science in year 10. She was always 20 minutes late to class. She was a fun teacher, but our lessons were only 40 minutes, so we'd literally waste half a session being late, which pissed me off to no end. Another teacher lost 2 years worth of my science coursework, which I had to redo by the end of the week. That was 3 days. I'm surprised I got the grade I did, and she didn't help. And finally, the doctor. This one makes me laugh. I don't know how the rest of you address your teachers, but here in England, it's common to call them Miss and Sir. But not the latest science teacher in year 10. Oh no, you had to address her as doctor, followed by her name, which was incredibly close to a well-known vegetable which we took advantage of. And if you didn't, she wouldn't answer or even acknowledge you. She asked if she could hit us, asked our parents if she could smack us upside the head, belittled us because we were public school kids from rough areas. This was all within the week. Needless to say, we made her time hell, and she ran out of the school crying, leaving all her belongings except her handbag. By Tuesday the following week, we didn't see her again. Oh, and every substitute ever who thought they were God when they walked into the room. Story 22. Didn't happen to me, but it was in the news recently. In a school, a number of students were assigned to take over for some teachers who had to go to a conference, and were told to wear business attire and only bring small bags. No backpacks allowed. Some of them brought backpacks because they lived far away from the school and had to bring a change of clothes, laptops, etc., because they needed to do schoolwork later that day. The faculty member in charge got so pissed he burned their backpacks and other bigger bags with all those belongings inside and called them stupid because they didn't get their phone out from their backpacks. Story 23. Man, 5th grade, we had a sub who was a real from making a kid cry for not bringing a pencil to slapping her desk every 5 minutes for no reason. But one incident stands out. During math, the class was quite rowdy because we had PE later. So, being the massive stuck-up that she was, she suddenly stops writing, erases the board, and angrily tells us to put our books in the bag and get out a piece of paper. She then instructs us to write down what she was writing down before she erased it. Whoever didn't do it wouldn't be allowed to go out for PE. The class went crazy. No one could remember anything except for a handful of kids, who were allowed to leave. I eventually had enough, and while she was on her desk staring at her mug, secretly got my notebook out under the desk and copied half onto the paper. She was satisfied enough that it wasn't empty, and let me go. Soon enough, half the class did the same. From my 11-year-old self, F you, Mrs. Georgina. The ironic thing is I now teach high school level math.
In Heidelberg, during my year abroad, my friend and I took a class that we thought would be interesting. It wasn't. The teacher was a complete cow who hated her non-German students, and as we were the only two that semester, go figure. She was okay with me after learning I was part German, but awful to my friend. We missed 2 classes overall, had to return to our own university for a little. This was agreed upon beforehand, so we missed 2 of her classes. Every other time we went to that class was together, so we missed the same amount. However, the woman told my friend that she automatically failed her class, as she missed 3. But I was fine, as I only missed 2. We both decided never to go to her class again, or sit her exam. Oddly enough, the exam never showed up on our year abroad credits, and we both passed with high marks. During my freshman year in college, I had mandatory writing class. I like writing. The professor was bad. On the first day, she said that all she cared about was the finished product and not the method that we took to get there. It was even written in the syllabus. About 2 weeks later, we had our first writing assignment. It was to be a 5-page paper on insert whatever it was. The problem was that it was due in 3 weeks, and she wanted us to turn in 3 full 5-page rough drafts before then. So my first turn-in was 3 paragraphs. She gave me an F, and I told her that everyone in there just bullshitted 5 pages and that she was a hypocrite. My second turn-in was just 2 words. You. She gave me an F again. So I went to the dean of students. I told him I'd take the Fs, but she couldn't lie and say the writing process was independent, and then have mandatory rough drafts. He agreed with me, had the Fs wiped, and had a meeting with the professor. I was informed that I didn't need to participate in the rough drafts the rest of the semester, but I did turn in the third one. 2 words. I win. I got an A- in the class, and then everyone clapped. My current political science class professor likes to generalize about things and then include everyone in that group as the same. We all know not to trust journalists. They're all idiots. Don't believe them. All millennials are stuck in the digital realm. Talking to your pet is the result of low social interaction. Millennials pride themselves on anonymity. Middle class only buys cheap things and then complains about them. That is why people shop at places like Walmart. I've stopped listening to him during class because in every class he's got something to say. Not me, but a girl flipped on my economics professor because she kept canceling class without sending out emails. The girl had that class only on Fridays and drove an hour to get there. It sucked that she got caught in traffic just to get a note to the classroom saying, "Canceled." At this age in technology, they should be using an e-notice board or forum system to send out mass announcements, or at the very least email. You would be surprised how many professors are still computer illiterate. A friend of mine wanted to go to a certain university that was out of state and somewhat tough to get into. The counselor told him not to waste his time as he would never get in. This pissed him off so much that he went to the principal, who told him to trust the counselor, as that was her job. He applied anyways, got accepted, and taped 2 copies to the counselor and the principal's door. He couldn't afford to go anyways, but he was trying to prove a point. A true hero. The feeling when you make it is the best. I talk from experience on this one. Oof, that brought back a bad memory. My mother and father passed when I was in my final year of school. I was off school for a while around the time of the second funeral. When I returned to school, my tutor decided it was her job to tell the class what had happened to me, right in front of everyone, instead of letting me do it on my own terms. To say that I lost my temper would be an understatement. I flipped my shit on a logic professor who lost my assignments records. You didn't do them. I'm looking at your grades and they are zeros. That's why you have a D. And I said, look, you dip. I have papers you've graded right here. They aren't even good, but they're not zeros. It was over the phone, but eventually I read through his comments on my papers while he was trying to argue with me. That's when he was like, okay, that doesn't sound made up. Scan your papers and email them in. Went from a D to a B. I flipped on several teachers, but this one still bugs me. One of my best friends in high school had died in a car accident, and a couple of days later, my friends and I told my teacher that we wouldn't be able to make it to class because of the viewing. She then proceeded to tell us that we need to plan our days better and how irresponsible it was. I have never felt so much rage. Screw you, Mrs. Weaver. That's an unacceptable response from her. You really must be out of your mind to say something like that. My IT teacher wanted to inspect my work, spreadsheets, or a Word document or something, anyways, and she accidentally deleted the file. I was upset, and I tried to point out that she just deleted my work. She started to shout at me, telling me I should have saved frequently. I shouted back, telling her that wasn't the issue. She outright deleted the file. It got pretty heated. My parents were called. We were outright yelling at each other for a good couple of minutes, to a point where we were both in tears. I was about 14 at the time. She should have known better. A few years later, my sister had her when we went to that school, and the same teacher berated my sister, calling her names, etc. What a bitch. It was a long time ago, and I was pretty stressed at the time. I can't exactly remember how, but after several attempts, I wasn't able to restore it. Looking back on what I know now, there are things that I could have done to restore it, even going as far as giving myself admin rights and having a poke around, but I was 14 at the time, being taught IT by a French teacher. I know a chap who once lost it in a lesson and threw a chair at the teacher. Some years, like 15 or so back, and the two are now good friends. Essentially, a discussion had turned into an argument, holding up the rest of the lesson. with a chap basically being awkward and pedantic, not letting it go, getting unduly steamed up himself, and apparently not realizing that everyone was getting pretty tired. The teacher made some snide remark and the chap flipped, threw a chair, and walked out. He waited outside, though cooling off, and afterward the teacher went outside as well, saying something to the effect of, "I think we both ought to apologize for what just happened." And so they did, and all was well. I had a teacher throw a softcover dictionary at my face once. He was, and still is, my favorite teacher I have ever had. A couple of weeks into my senior year of high school, the president gave a speech about the importance of school, or something, I don't know. I wasn't really paying attention. Anyways, all the teachers in my school had to set up their projectors so that we could watch it. My math teacher couldn't figure out how to get her projector working, so me, being the nerdy kid, offered to help. She had a fit. Started screaming about how she wasn't stupid, and how I just needed to sit down and shut up. After a few more minutes of her failing to fix it, she pointed at me and ordered me to fix it. I said, "Fix it yourself." She told the whole class to go next door to watch the speech in that teacher's room. When we got up to leave, she pulled me aside and told me that when the class got back, I was going to stand up and apologize for being so rude to her. I refused and went to join the rest of the class. She spent the rest of the year making my life miserable. She told me on several occasions that she was going to make sure I failed her class. Sure enough, I failed her class. That's the only class I ever failed. Simply abusing the power she has. It's ridiculous that somebody like that is teaching. Man, this really reminds me of a story I have about a teacher of mine. Also in high school, a teacher wanted to play a movie on disc, but she kept pressing the eject button expecting it to be the play button or some shit. I don't know what she was thinking. The third time she went to press the same button after inserting the disc again, I may have slightly snapped that she shouldn't press the button, to which my teacher responds, "Well, sorry, at least I get along better with people than with computers." I'm insecure. Cue cast laughter due to the sick burn of the teacher, and it sticks around for a bit, but the next day people have forgotten all about it. Fast forward to the next time I have that class, start of the lesson, teacher waits till everyone is seated. "I'm sorry about what I said this last lesson, curiously. I was unaware that you're autistic." As far as I'm aware, I don't have any form of autism. Maybe she should have called me spastic due to my ADHD, but honestly, 10 years later, I'm still salty about that one, and it probably left her vapid head the moment that she said it. When I was in 8th grade, my science teacher decided the day before the last test of the year to give us an extra 16 pages of new material to learn by ourselves and appear in the test. Needless to say, everyone lost their shit and started complaining. I wrote her an angry letter. I was later forced to apologize, or they would tell my parents. I apologized because I may have been a little inappropriate, and by the end of the year, she was fired after her first year in the school. She also thought it was a good idea to bring her dogs to part of the lessons in the science lab when there were two kids who are allergic to dogs. LMAO. I had a teacher that thought latex allergies were fake. One day we did an experiment with balloons and a kid said she was allergic to latex and the teacher screamed, "No, you ain't!" and then started to rub her violently with the balloon. She got fired that semester. Did a math test, and on the paper, you could only mark your answer. You had to do the calculations on another paper. Long story short, my teacher lost my calculations paper and wouldn't admit it. He said that I didn't hand it over, that I cheated, and some other crap. So I went to the school supervisor and asked to take the test again, and she let me. My teacher asked to look while I did the test, and he made another test way harder. I friggin' aced it right in front of him. He hated my guts for the rest of high school, and I couldn't care less. I had a Spanish teacher, and in order to gain other students' sympathy, she'd make fun of one of the students, and kind of bully. Not that bad, but well, that student for this hour of class. Of course, other students would sometimes laugh because the class was super boring, so it's like a show. I hated that. Of course, she'd pick the students that didn't reply back to her provocation, the low profile type, and of course she would use the perfect excuse after being mean. "Oh, it's just a joke, ha!" Once that guy that never searched for trouble with anyone was her victim of the day. She takes him as an example to describe a homeless guy in a picture. After only 10 long minutes, he stands up and he leaves the classroom, crying. And when she stops him right before he leaves, he tells her his dad died the previous night and he pushes her away. Once the door closed behind him, she paused for a second and take a crying voice to repeat what he just said. "My dad just cried. Poor baby." Before I realized it, she received my Spanish book in the face, and I called her an ugly yeah, my insult level isn't great in Spanish. That one makes my blood boil, man. Fuck. When I was in high school, we had this small, angry teacher that played rugby, or at least tried to, and he was always belittling students to feel better about himself. One day we had physical ed, and our teacher couldn't come, so the little and always moody teacher that played rugby came to replace her. The little teacher was trying to show off his skills at rugby, making our class play some game where we had to tackle who had the ball. We didn't tackle hard enough, so the little guy joined to tackle some students and show off his grandness. He was having fun being unstoppable and yelling at us if that was all we could do. I was kind of mad, so I just went running full speed at him. Little teacher got tackled. He hit the ground very hard. That was something our class laughed about all year. For those wondering, he used to despise and treat us like he was reaffirming his manliness. Though he had some good points too. It was kind of crazy. Didn't seem like a student-teacher relationship, so it wasn't that boring most of the time. I guess that's the reason why most of us still remember that moody little teacher. I had a history teacher in high school who claimed the following. America caused the Holocaust. Americans did the Pearl Harbor attack just to join the war. JFK was played by the Soviets. 9/11 was an inside job. I know, common meme. And the icing on the cake was when Chris Kyle was murdered. She says that nobody cares about dead soldiers, and proceeded to spend an hour covering the life and career of Whitney Houston. I got up and I walked out of the room at that point. She left after 1 year there.